fate is before you. Choose wisely.
Highs with the lows. That's like these days. World chained up, he on lockdown. Phone call 3 ways. I just pray that he find God now. It's no replay. On my way up to the top now. That's on me, ayy. The highs with the lows. That's like these days. World chained up, he on lockdown. Phone call 3 ways. I just pray that he find God now. It's no replay. On my way up to the top now. That's on me, ayy. Any day could've been it. High school price on my head. Paranoid lying in my bed. Pray to God they don't turn my shirt cherry red. I was lost, didn't know me. Introduced myself to codeine. 6 months was a dope fiend. Philly didn't even know things. There was a low me. Swear to God, it would've owed me. Everything you ever told me. Everything you ever showed me. I forgot it. Caused me drama. I used to stay on one. Now I changed on them. The highs with the lows. That's life these days. Bro chained up, he on lockdown. Phone call 3 ways. I just pray that he find God now. It's no replay. On my way up to the top now. That's on me, ayy. Hit the highs with the lows. That's like these days. Bro chained up, he on lockdown. Phone call 3 ways. I just pray that he find God now. It's no replay. On my way up to the top now. That's on me, ayy. I just saw Jizzy got a plane. Guess that's what he meant when he said nothing was the same. Lately I've been grounded, energizing off the pain. Some things gon' change, I'm just soaking up the game. Through the mud, out the rain like I remember all those same nights. Now I'm on top, no stage fright. Now I'm on go, no brake lights. Hit the pedal, hit the engine roar. No fear like a matador. Breaking trends and I'm making more. Going up, climbing ladders more. I can't be stopped. Now I do what I want. Real, no front. All the way to the top. Highs with the lows. That's like these days. World chained up, he on lockdown. Phone call 3 ways. I just pray that he find God now. It's no replay. On my way up to the top now. That's on me, ayy. Hit the highs with the lows. That's like these days. World chained up, he on lockdown. Phone call 3 ways. I just pray that he find God now. It's no replay. On my way up to the top now. That's on me, ayy. Keep God first. I see evil, when I converse. Not today, say. This how God works. Play my position, what is given with no concerns. Go. Set it off. Top of the morning, I'm gonna set it off. You living boring, I'm gonna set it off. Shooting, I'm scoring, I'm gonna set it off. Like soldiers torn, I'm gonna set it off. Son of God, no, I am not son of man. Blessings keep falling, the fingers keep coming in. I got you, but just know I'm texting like Uncle Sam. Left to the bank, you know that I'm coming in. We don't do it for the bands though, we don't do it for the clout. Legacy on the line, so I'm moving in and out. Seen good ones turn top dog, greedy ones get knocked off. I keep looking at the bench like I could never not ball. Coach keep me in the game, Curry deadly with the range. I keep looking in the mirror like, who is he? I'm insane. Who am I? He insane. Guess I ain't the one to blame. What's done is done, won't change. Time to live up to my name. Real will be real, fake gon' fall. Took time with this here, I'm made for a while. No sleeping while I won't fall. No sleeping while I want it all. I keep God first. I see evil, when I converse. Not today, say. This how God works. Play my position, what is given with no concerns. Go. Set it off. Top of the morning, I'm gonna set it off. You living boring, I'm gonna set it out. Shooting, I'm scoring, I'm gonna set it out. Like soldiers torn, I'm gonna set it out. Told my baby, meet me at the bank. Told my mama, I'ma break the trend. Locked in, I'ma change the weight. Working for him, baby's kids. Hard times couldn't make the rent. Working hard, couldn't save a cent. Lonely nights, just me and God. Swear to him, always made the ends. Grab a paper, see the news. Hate coming by the tools. Walk a mile in my shoes. Something you can never do. Got my back against the wall. Bet I always pull through. Who are you, who are you? Who are you, who are you? Sending shots, I block 'em. Superman with the moves. Rock 'em, sock 'em, drop pop 'em. Play to win, never lose. Run it up, I top 'em. Plate full, belly too. I hip hop or pop 'em. Anything I could do. The real won't be real, fake gon' fall. Took time with this here, I made for a while. No sleeping while I won't fall. No sleeping while I won't it all. I keep God first. I see evil, I evil when I converse. Not today, say. This how God works. Play my position, what is given with no concerns. Go, 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 go. Set it out. Top of the morning, I'm gonna set it out. You living boring, I'm gonna set it out. Shooting, I'm scoring, I'm gonna set it out. Like soldiers torn, I'm gonna set it out. I hit record a drop, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets. When I'm performing, never boring, now you can't afford it. Champagne Perrier, finished friends on my face. Looking like I'm from the deep, these no Cartiers. Pockets deep, 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 bro. I can make it in my seat, bro. Do you and doing me, bro. Making noise, use a peep, bro. Whoa, I press the button and the doors go up like that money clip us now, the new now looks like. Whoa, upgrade her diamonds, now her girlfriends are like. Whoa, 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 whoa. Neighborhood on the scene, neighborhood on the strip. Neighborhood be the name, neighborhood no crib. Neighborhood that's me, neighborhood that's Nick. Neighborhood do the dance, neighborhood do the dip. Okay, thought I'd never make it like no way. I'm the real deal, no role play. My days off, that's no days. No, I hustle hard, young rose. E be the shooter, that's cold case. Those on the deals, that's brose. Got no pay, yo, no say. Okay, this the news, tell them read it. Been the one since the fetus. Don't sleep on me, Tempur-Pedic. That's a no, no, no. Spending dope for no reason. Got a ball head, Mr. Cleaner. Heard the big bags overseas, then we gon' go, go, go. Whoa, I press the button and the doors go up like. Whoa, that money clip us now, the new now looks like. Whoa, upgrade her diamonds, now her girlfriends are like. Whoa, 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 whoa. I press the button and the doors go up like. Whoa, that money clip us now, the new now looks like. Whoa, upgrade her diamonds, now her girlfriends are like. Whoa, 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 whoa. On my own, no fixer. I'm gon' ball, no picker. That I ate doors, they live for. Talking on my back, go figure. Whole team eats fun splitter. Never was the one to go flicker. No face, no case, no picture. Full place, big stakes, my dinner. Flip that, Canal Street, flip that. Last week, old money. This week, new racks. Never buy 9 more. If I can't afford to gift wrap, stunning in your foreign car. You keep riding rental tax. Heard you roll the other lane, we are not the same. Couple thousand in my pocket, this pocket chick. Rubber bands on my arm, this is not for play. I put 20 on the crib while you cop a chain. I know they hated or love it. You know I love when they hate it. Last year was living basic. Haters on the other side. 3 up, read between the lines. Know I got some angels with me. Made it through some evil times. Late night on some demon time. Pour the Sprite, I need love. I can't lie, can't see Brainstorm, you can assume with your chains on. I can see none with the lights off. Cap, you been the main one. Coolin' when I got my main.
Fatherlessness is a byproduct that can often lead to brokenness. But what happens when men don't get the outcomes related to their social sustainability, but also mental wellness when they don't have fathers? In the past, it appeared that fathers were more or less prominent in the lives of their children and families were more intact. But it appears that there's a percentage of men that are going out in this world completing chaos or more or less part of chaos that's led children to fatherlessness. Many times we assume that a large percentage of men in our community, especially black men, are complicit in having fatherless children. But based on evidence and research, it appears not that there's a large percentage of men that are complicit in this, but it's only a small percentage. But mine is that Luther Vandross wrote a song back in the past called Dance With My Father Again. And we live in a time now where boys have deferred power because they don't have fathers, and girls look for power because they've never seen fathers. And because of this ongoing conundrum, then are our kids more or less adequately prepared to know what having a strong masculine father is? We're going to explore this show that I did with my dear friend Suzette Speaks on Saturday of last week. And we're going to talk about the impact of fatherlessness as I review this show and also as it relates to mental wellness. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this show as I bring it to you live from the greatest state in the union, the Tar Heel State. And I need you guys to remember this is there are 7 elements to male optimization. If it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. Has fatherlessness impacted your mental wellness? Be well. All right, guys, we're about to start in a minute. Get your pens and your papers ready. We're going to talk about the impact of fatherlessness in the lives of our boys and our girls and what the trajectory might be unless we turn around this negative influence. You know and I know that when boys have strong masculine fathers and girls, children have healthy identities. But it appears that now we live in a time now where not only is our marriage rates on an all-time low, but many men don't see the benefits of marriage. So get your pens and paper ready. We're going to have a review of the show that I did with Suzette Speaks. Let's do it. Bringing it to you live once again from the greatest state in the union, the Tar Heel State, where the topography is serene, pristine, and verdant green, where every day is Father's Day, and where manhood is part of hills and valleys, victories and failures, and whereas men, we don't agree on all things or ideologies, but tonight we come together as allies of a common cause only to dissipate once the crisis is over. Now listen, I'm about to drop some fire for your mind. But before I drop that fire, let's explore why we are doing the Manhood Chronicles. All right, let's have a discussion as we talk about the impact of fatherlessness. How many of you guys, men and women that are listening, had fathers in your homes? How many had dads that were active in your lives that more or less gave you identity, but not only did they give you identity, they gave you influence? It appears that there's a crisis going on in America where there's an absence of fathers. And as I said before when I used the old cliche, fire for your mind, children need the illumination of their fathers to help them become better versions of themselves. When a dad is more or less giving his sons guidance, and when he's getting his daughters warmth, then they're less at risk of going astray. You know it, I know that having fathers in the home is not 100% guaranteed that kids won't go astray. But based on the odds, it appears that having strong, intact fathers is very important for the functioning of a child. The question remains that, have fatherhood been compromised? Have fatherhood been compromised? And if it have been compromised, then what are the repercussions long term? Can we have a vibrant community when we don't have fathers? Can our boys know how to demand power in relationships, whether it be romantic or business, if they've never seen their fathers or their men in an element of power? We live in a time now where many boys do not see strong masculine men in the community or the schools, but many times in leadership positions of power as it relates to being black. I grew up in a time where we had stronger men than when we had fathers. But it appears now we don't see it as much as it used to be, and it could be due for a myriad of reasons. The question remains, if you have been a victim of not having a father, how has it impacted you mentally? Has it caused you to have a low self-esteem? Has it caused you not to love yourself? Has it caused you to seek validation from other people? These questions remain as we continue this, what I call evolution of manhood, because there are manhood chronicles and manhood stories that need to be talked about, but also need to be addressed. And until we get to the point where our fathers are more or less giving the credence that they need, where our fathers are given the position of power and authority that they need, then our kids are not going to be at their best. And that's why these conversations are so important. Shout out to my man, the Narc Perspective, for that $20 super sticker. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you, Narc Perspective, for that $20 super sticker.
That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? Got 5 on it.
But I want to have this conversation with the brothers, but also some of the women, as we talk about the impact of fatherlessness, and have fatherlessness been compromised, or fathers been compromised? Because there's always a ongoing perception that men have played a role in the dissemination or the breakdown of the black community. But is it an over-evaluation or an overestimation or an overgeneralization as it relates to the negative traits associated with masculinity? What role has feminism played in the demise of our black community? What role has the sexual revolution played in the demise of our black community or the American fabric? Will there be a time when we get back to a place where we will see strong, vibrant black homes and black communities? I personally don't see in this lifetime, because it takes time to get back out of the cesspool that we have currently are in. So the question remains is that fatherlessness. Did you guys know that many famous men became infamous because of having men in their lives that were not there, but also they had a negative impact in the lives of their children? Could it be surmised that you can be fatherless and still be in the home with a man? And the reason why I say that, because a man can be in the house with a child. He could be there present physically, but from a mental perspective, he's not there with his kids. And if that is the case, then what do we do, and how do we respond in a manner that's more or less critical and more or less necessary to help our kids get the best outcomes? From the inner cities, from the countryside, we're beginning to see the manifestation of not having fathers in the homes. As I said earlier, the lack of fathers teach boys to defer power, because it does not teach them to stand on principles. For girls, it teaches girls to look for power, because it could more or less be surmised that that's why girls like the bad boys. And, you know, in a child's early developmental years, it's very important to have those things in place. It's important to have the proper safeguards in place to help children get the best outcomes. But when we're in a world where it appears that we tend to minimize the influence and the importance of fathers, when we live in a world where, you know, we hear some of our women say that, I'm the mother and the father. What it does, it minimizes the power and the potential of having a strong, vibrant community, but also a healthy mental wellness for our boys. Because boys are part of what's called the warrior class. And when that warrior class is disseminated or more or less broken down, then how can we get the outcomes that we need long term? So we're going to have a conversation on today. We're going to have a powerful conversation because we need to talk about the impact of fathers on the psyche of their children. And so, guys, like, share, and subscribe to the channel as we have this very timely discussion that I had with Suzette Speaks. Another question could more or less be asked is, are fathers seen as agents of oppression? Why do we always paint fathers in a negative light? Are fathers seen as agents of oppression? And why are fathers painted in a negative light? Are some of you men that are listening still having issues with authority and power? Are you dealing with displaced aggression because you have a disdain for your father? Are you more or less living through the vicarious trauma of what your mother went through? Therefore, you don't respect masculine men. Are some of you young girls dealing with the impact of not having a father? Therefore, you hate any form of masculine authority because you never saw it. And once again, this is what happens, guys, when we don't have strong fathers in our homes and when we don't have strong fathers in our communities. It could be argued that in Western culture, the fatherlessness is more paramount than it's ever been before in human history. You know and I know there was a time when the black family was more intact than it is now. When I think about men like Karl Marx, when I think about famous contemporaries, those men were impacted by having fathers in their lives that were mentally abusive, but also not having fathers in their lives. And it could be argued that sometimes if the father's not a masculine man, it's probably better off that they don't even have a father in the home in the first place. Because you can be there present in the life of a child, but that child still could be, in theory, fatherless because they don't have the proper direction that they need to be the best versions of themselves. Some of you young ladies are dealing with the mental health pathologies of not having a father. You don't know what it feels like not to have a father in your life. And this has impacted you in a very negative way as well. Because you don't have trust. Many times you don't know what to look for in a man. And sometimes on an unconscious level, you look for the man that you think you should have got in your father, which in essence more or less bring forth this ongoing cycle of dysfunction, which in essence can lead to our girls having daddy issues, which can lead to our boys being emasculated. Because many times when boys are in the homes with their mothers, the mothers teach their sons how to think, how a woman would think, which is based on her feelings. But a strong masculine man would teach his son how to think based on principle, but also based on power, because she only respects power and strength, because that's what women are wired for. That's why women look up to men. That's why most women want taller men, because height symbolizes power and strength. Status symbolizes power and strength as well. Get the likes up, guys. They have not donated, donate to the channel, but also share the content in this timely discussion as we're talking about the importance of having fathers. Let me read you some of these comments real quick because this conversation is very important. Shout out to Top Gun. We ain't signed it. Blank said the economy no longer needs families, so the propaganda is to paint fathers as oppression. No doubt, brother. I respect that. I like that. We ain't signed it. Blank says a woman cannot be a good wife if she was not raised by her father. You're exactly right. I think having a strong masculine father teaches girls to respect masculine order and masculine authority. I talked about it in the past that in order for a woman to truly submit to the authority of her husband, she had to have a father more or less showing his wife how to submit to his authority. As a strong masculine father, your job is to prepare your daughter to be willing to submit to her husband when you give her away over to her husband. And so when the girl see her mother submitting to the authority of her father, and where her father And when the dad is not a slave to what I call the fairy princess syndrome, then what that girl does, she learns to more or less submit to the order of a masculine man. And so once again, we live in a time when you don't see that vibration of masculinity. And in essence, what it's done is led to an ongoing crisis in heteronormative masculinity, but also an ongoing crisis as it relates to the vibrancy of the family. Some will argue that the government played a role in taking the fathers out of the home. The government has become Big Daddy Father. And because of that, children are walking in paths that are not more or less beneficial to them long term. So the question remains, how can we have a very vibrant and healthy community when there's the absence of fathers? Now listen, we know that by and large that most black men are good men. There is a percentage of dusty men that are going out here making kids out of wedlock, impregnating women, not taking care of their responsibility. We do not more or less exonerate those type of men. Many men, it could be argued, are very invisible. They don't have a pathway that's more or less related to fatherhood. And because of that, many times, you see men suffer in silence because they feel like they're irrelevant and that it's never enough. Their good is never good enough. And when that happens, it's the breakdown of what's called the community. Because see, what's happening now, guys, we become very isolated. I remember a time growing up in the country where families were more intact. You had more children having fathers. It was more normal to see a father in the home than to not see a father in the home. But around the time I graduated from high school back in 90, you begin to see the downcline of intact homes. And now it's an ongoing epidemic or a pandemic where you don't see intact, strong families anymore. Let me read out these comments real quick. Let me read out these super chats. Thank you to the NARC Perspective for showing a little support. Thank you again, brother. I appreciate it. Shout out to Jazz Man 08, a man that liked jazz from the 803 in South Carolina. Here's some support that's much needed for this conversation. No doubt, brother. I appreciate it. Shout out to Asher ID OJ. The list of images of the rite of passage from one life is another, especially for boys and men, have contributed significantly to fatherlessness. Right. And so let me redo some of these super chats real quick. So Narc, he gave it again. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man. You're a kind brother.
That's a deal, right? That's a deal,
no doubt.
Right?
Appreciate it, Narc.
That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? Got 5 on it.
And so thank you, Narc Perspective, for being the sponsor of this chat thus far. Thank you for your generous offers as I continue this discussion on the impact of having fathers in the lives of their children. So many of you men that are living now have more or less don't have an identity. Your development has been arrested because you don't have a strong father in your life. You don't even know what power looks like. But in other cultures, there was a rite of passage, there was a community, and there was a community of elders where iron sharpened iron, when the men more or less sharpened one another and held each other accountable. But there is an attack, in my mind, on heteronormative masculinity. And because of that attack, I think what it's done is made our boys and men become weak. Because we don't see, especially in the black community, enough men that more or less exude power. We don't even see it in the churches. And because of that, many men are looking for men that can lead them in the right direction. Millennial men, zennial men are looking for men that can lead them in the right direction. Because fathers give illumination to the minds of their boys, and they give warmth to the hearts of their daughters. And so when fathers are removed for whatever reason, it causes social chaos. It causes mental health issues. And those mental health issues are continuing to permeate in this cesspool called America. All right. So we're going to talk about it because there are a lot of men that have learned to be simps, which in essence mean the unconscious simp supplementing irrational male patterns. And I did say male. What they are doing, they are supplementing irrational male patterns. What that basically means is that men defer their power by supplementing narcissistic traits in some of these modern women. And that's an unconscious simp. He doesn't know any better. He thinks by more or less giving his power away, it makes the woman respect him. But it doesn't. It makes her actually not like him or repel him. Because women only respect power, and strength. That's all they respect. The next one is called the conscious simp. That means he sacrifices important male principles. He knows what he's doing is wrong, but he chooses to do it anyway. So we're going to have a conversation. Shout out to Top Gun viciously.
That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right?
Funny.
Got 5 on it.
You are funny. You are very funny. We viciously and vigorously need fathers. And you're right, this is a much-needed discussion that needs to be addressed and discussed. So I'm going to pull up the link that I had, the show that I did with Suzette Speaks. And we're going to more or less critique this show and the impact of not having a father when a child is growing up. And shout out to Suzette Speaks, guys. Go check out Suzette Speaks, a very intellectual sister, good woman.
I dreamt,
I respect her
and
highly.
the interpretation plus a little Kim and Kanye learning about co-parenting. It was very good. It was very good. Thank you. My dad was never part of my life, so I'm here to learn. Okay, Donna, me hear you. Thank you, Natalie. All right, the sun is shining bright. Yeah, it's a cold South Florida day. We woke up in the 40s, and we was like,
Shout
we're
out
thinking
to her.
about playing. Okay, so let me bring on my guests, y'all. We got a deep conversation to behold and to participate in, right? This is about you also as my kind of co-experts based on your life experience. But I'm going to start from the clinical perspective by bringing on a fantastic, I would call him manosphere, but he has just so much that I relate to when I listen to him. So I don't know, he had a little something for the ladies too. But a man who speaks from such a place of...
And it's so refreshing to hear women like Suzette Speaks willing to introspect. There's a percentage of women that come into these spaces that are willing, really trying to learn. Many are beginning to try to understand why men think the way that they think and what men want. You know, guys, and I know that there are some women that come in these spaces that have nefarious intents. They really don't want to learn. Some are just being nosy. And some are more or less trying to, some would argue, sabotage the masculine movement. But there is a percentage in my mind of good sisters like Suzette and women in general that are trying to learn. But sometimes when they come into these groups or these male spaces, it hurt their feelings when they really see what men are really thinking. And that's why it's so important when women come into men's spaces, you listen and learn and understand where men are coming from. Because many times, ladies, you've been lied to. Some men lie to you. And so, do you want the truth or do you want to lie? Because we forgot to ask the men what they wanted in relationships. Many times women come in thinking that they are the prize, but no, you're the prize in your head. Until he exonerates you as the prize in his life, because men are the arbiters of relationships, then you can be the prize in your head. But until you get that ring, you're just a prize in your head, especially the man that you want. You can have many men liking you, but it's not necessarily the man that you want. So let's finish the conversation.
Wisdom and authority that it really intrigued me when I first subscribed to his channel. I was like, whoa. And you know what? Let me big up Chuck. My brethren Ben told me about the culture clinician from like last year. He's like, you need to bring on the culture clinician. You need to bring it on. And look at me. I was like, Chuck, big up yourself. It took me a while, my brother, but I found him and I liked what I saw. So I am just going to give him the floor. Honestly, I'm here to learn as well. I grew up, just in full disclosure, with my dad and mom and dad. But again, I also have my little specks of unhealedness as a result of just the pressures of emigrating to a new country. That would break up any marriage. I'm telling you, if you're, it was a heavy lift, right? We weren't rich, working. I would call it working middle class, I guess you would call it. But we were rich, thank God, in principles, in morals. Thank you, God. But there was a lot of social pressure on my dad as the man, as supposed to be the breadwinner in a new society without a network yet. My dad is an electrician by trade.
And I don't think people understand how much pressure men have on them. I don't think people understand it. I'm honored to say my dad is still in my life. My dad is 78. My mom and dad are still married. I grew up in a very rare situation. They've been married for over 50 years. And my dad was not a man of many words, but he was a man of example. And, I'm sure my dad simped in some ways like many men simp when it comes down to my mom, but overall he's a good man. And he loved his family. He still does love his family, even at 78. When I go home many times, he's cooking us food. And so, he's an awesome man, but we don't understand the pressure that men have. I'll never forget it when I was a kid. I saw my dad go in the woods and start crying. And I'm like, why is he crying for? Because my dad had the pressure of the world on his shoulders. And I'm going to challenge some of you men that are dealing with very uncooperative women in your lives. If you got a woman in your life that's not cooperative, you give her a fair warning. You tell her what you expect. If she does not change, you come up with an exit strategy to move on. Because your life is short. Tomorrow is not promised to no man. Many men have gone by the way of the grave only to hear the echoes from the gravesite because nobody heard their story. And that's why I'm telling you men to live firm, live your life on standards and principles that are unapologetically masculine. Because that's why we have these stories in the Manhood Chronicles where men come together to share their stories and to share their pain. When we talk about manhood being a series of hills and valleys, victories and failures. Because manhood is not more or less a destination, it's a journey. And it's full with a lot of tumult. And so you don't need a woman in your life that's going to cause you more chaos. You need a woman that's going to more or less be a cheerleader. A woman, like Teddy Pendergrass said, somebody that's going to inspire me. Men need inspiration. And so when you're dealing with the world and then you come home to a contentious woman, then that does not do any good for your mental health. I'm talking about good men. We're not talking about dusty men. We're not talking about men that don't take care of their responsibility. We're talking about hardworking, good brothers that are hardworking men. They love their families. So let me clarify that, because we tend to equivocate and overgeneralize all men mixed in with that negative pool of men as well.
Trade, but he had a very difficult time kind of breaking into the American system. So there was a lot of pressure on him, right? Pressure on the family, therefore. So we got a lot to share. I'm going to bring up my guest. He can unmute. Please give a warm Suzette Speaks welcome to my special guest today. Y'all give it up for none other than the one and the only kosher clinician.
Suzette, you're funny. You gave me a grand Leo rising. Thank you, dear. And as we said, bring it to you live once again from the greatest state in the union, the Tar Heel state. And so I look forward to this very timely conversation as we talk about the intricacies of not having a father in the relationship of a child. And I would say unequivocally, yes, I think fatherlessness plays a role in not only the development and the functioning of a child, but it also can more or less impact or more or less impede the psychosocial development of a child as well, something that I call arrested development. So I look forward to this conversation because fathers give children identity. I believe, Suzette, that in the greater context of social evolution, that when boys and girls don't have fathers, more or less it teaches boys to defer power in the broader relationship. It teaches the girl to look for power. And so it becomes an ongoing circle of brokenness and dysfunction where neither are more or less getting the things that they need to satiate the mental issues that they are dealing with. So I look forward to this conversation.
I love it. And again, I know this is a deep brother who has, and I'm going to ask you just to tell us a little bit about your day-to-day and your experience of people to understand that you have, the hands-on clinical experience of dealing with people and counseling people and helping people to heal. They are saying a little, maybe, I don't know if your mic is too close. Several people have commented that it's a little hot. It's coming out a little bit.
It's too hot? Okay, how about now? Ask them now. Is that okay?
Perfect. I think that's a good point.
Okay, I got that.
Tell us what you do in your real life. I know you're a YouTuber. Y'all, please, moderators, drop his channel so folks can go over and subscribe.
Right.
Like I said, his content goes from, well, you tell me.
Right. So my background is very diverse, Suzette. My background is very diverse. I started off in law enforcement. I went to school. I got an associate degree in law enforcement. Went to school to be a cop. I actually worked in the penal system. Worked with adjudicated youth. Was a mental health correctional officer for a while. I did that for 7 years. And then, that was my first degree. Always wanted to be an advocate for children, but also always wanted to be an advocate for men because I knew that manhood was the epigenesis to a healthy society. And so from there, I went back to school and got my bachelor's in social work, went back to school. I taught school, so I'm a licensed teacher as well. I taught school. I'm a licensed special ed teacher. And then I went back to the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and I got my master's in clinical social work. So my background is very diverse. I've done it from the law perspective. I've done it from the educational perspective, and now I'm doing it from the clinical perspective. So, it's very unique and rare because you don't find too many men that have, degrees in different areas, but yet to have the interrelatedness to it as well. So I'm a licensed therapist now. I do a little bit of 1099. It's a 1099 contractor. I probably start my own practice at some point. And, I just been grinding for the longest, been grinding to see men get empowered because I feel like we don't do enough to empower our men. And I think when men are not empowered, they're not at their best. And so I've always said, if we empower our men, on the flip side, we will empower our women. If you protect his six, then he will protect your six. But the question remains, Suzette, who's protecting his six, which is his ego. So that's it in a nutshell.
After 30 days, I could not believe my before and after picture. I literally rolled back the hands of time.
Yes, sir. And I'm looking, like I said, I read the comments. Everybody's like, yes, we can hear him perfectly. What you said is
and guys, I want you to ask yourself the question: do you feel like overall that most women in America, regardless of the ethnic hue, has their man best interest at heart? Do you feel that modern women in America have been conditioned to protect the ego of their man, but also to give that man peace? If you believe that's the case, hit 1. If not, I want you guys to hit 2 as we finish this conversation. Thank you.
That you have a very diverse, I didn't know this, law enforcement to begin
Right.
with, clinical social work, right? And now therapy.
Right. So I was a special ed teacher, so I got my associates in criminal justice. I was going to be a cop, but I worked in the prison system for like 2 years as a mental health correction officer, then did 7 years with the Department of Juvenile Justice with some of the worst youth in the state. And, I can sing that song by Mahalia Jackson. My soul looked back and wonder how I got over because that was extremely stressful. And then I got my bachelor's from North Carolina Central in general social work, then went back and got my license in special education. Taught school for about 5 years. So I was a special ed teacher. And then I got my master's from UNC Chapel Hill. So I've done, I'm from 3 different dimensions. Right, I'm a gamut, right?
Just letting the people know. Just letting the people know what we got going on. So when he speaks, y'all, like I say, he's not just any old person, right? We should listen because he has, again, the hands-on experience. And I guess I would like to segue right into your experiences in special ed and in the educational system, because I'm sure a lot of what you saw in juvenile justice and the what the children manifest oftentimes is linked to fatherlessness. So let's just open up the conversation, y'all. Again, we are going to flow. We're going to bring you guys in and get us your perspectives as well. But where do we begin? Let's start with, I guess, some of what you saw from those years of working hands-on with young people who were challenged and therefore were in the criminal justice system or the juvenile justice system. Talk a little bit about how fatherlessness tied into some of what you did and saw.
Well, listen, the greatest culprit, Suzette, for children that are in, how can I say it, for children that are more or less prone to criminality normally don't have fathers. Children that don't have fathers have a higher recidivism rate. They're more at risk for petty crimes. They're more at risk for dropping out of school. They're more at risk for not having educational outcomes. They're more at risk for having low-wage jobs. Fatherlessness plays a major role in the identity of a child. And the greatest predicament, or the greatest, and that's why we have these conversations. Just based on that small survey sample, many of the men are saying that they don't feel like the women in this country have been adequately trained to protect his ego, but also adequately trained to more or less foster peace in his life as a man. And that's unfortunate, because men are at their best when they got a woman protecting their ego, but more or less protecting his six. This indicator for a child getting caught up in criminality was not having a father. And so, I saw it all through from working in law enforcement when I was in the prison system, but also I saw in special ed. A lot of the kids didn't have fathers. You didn't even see, male teachers to more or less assuage a lot of things that the kids were going through. And also now I see it in the clinical world, many of them don't have fathers. I would say out of the kids I've seen and the families I've seen, I would say at least 90%, they don't have fathers. And I think it's very serious because I think it's a health crisis, and I think it's a social crisis that needs to be addressed. But this thing has been permeating, Suzette, not only in the modern times that we live in. It's been permeating since the 70s. Back in the 70s, it was more or less purported that 26% of children were born in single parent homes. But now it's mushroomed to over 80%. And so that's an issue if we're going to have what's called stable homes and stable communities, because one of the great indicators to mental wellness of a child, Suzette, is something called, it's an instrument that we use in the clinical work called the locus, and it's called the level. Basically what that stands for is this, Suzette. Kids are at their best for healing mentally when the environment is suitable and stable. But when most kids now come in at homes when they don't have fathers, then they're not at their best. Now watch this. We're not saying, as you said earlier, that having a two-parent intact home is the panacea to the social ills of the world. It's not the panacea. But we are looking at the odds. The odds are a lot higher when they're in a two-parent home. And I will say this with a masculine father, not a cream puff. You got to be a masculine father. When they're in a home with a masculine father that only set parameters and set examples. And, guys, that's what I've said before in the past. Having a father in the home is one thing. Having a father in the home is one thing, but the question remains, is he a very masculine father? There are many men in families, but they are not masculine. They believe that, mama knows best, or, the women run the relationship, and they just sit back and do what the woman says. But kids need masculine fathers. I will argue a child is in a single parent home where the woman has been conditioned to respect masculine authority and masculine power is probably better than a child in a home where the father is there, but he's fatherless when it comes down to projecting power as a man. And that's why it's so important to talk about the dichotomy of having a masculine father versus just an average father. Keep listening. Okay. The kids tend to do better. And what I mean by cream puff, it just means a father that just goes along to get along. I'm talking about a masculine father that loves his wife, but he'll check her if she get out of line. It's like an old school archetype, like the James Evans, which is rare. But kids tend to do better in those environments where the fathers are strong, where the fathers are stable, where they give the sons instruction, where they teach them about the ravages of relationships, but also understanding female nature, how to get what you want in the relationship and also give her what she needs in the relationship. So, guys, I want you to ask yourself the question, how many men have you seen like James Evans? Most modern American fathers don't personify the same qualities of a James Evans. But imagine if at least 30 to 40% of men had the same mindset and the authority of a James Evans. Do you guys think that we would not be in this quagmire that we're in today? Do you think our boys will have a more healthy identity as it relates to being men? They tried to, have James Evans exited out on Good Times because James Evans personified a strong masculine father. He more or less symbolized a strong masculine father instead of a father that more or less went along to get along. And so we need strong masculine men in our communities to lead our children in the right direction, because there is an onslaught. When boys and girls are in strong masculine homes, not only do the recidivist rates drop, but the children are more or less prone to sexual abuse. And sexual abuse is not it's genderless. It happens with boys and girls. That's why we need to continue to have the conversation. But many men feel like when it comes down to getting quality women, the marriage is not really worth the risk. I would say all those things play a role in the evolution, Suzette, of having a healthy man, but also a healthy woman, because girls suffer and they're more at risk for sexual abuse when they don't have a strong father in the home. But here's the caveat, boys as well. So we tend to make sexual abuse
specific to girls. And
right.
Boys are suffering just as much. Yeah.
Boys are suffering just as much. Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. Right.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit because I know that there are people, and I again, leave a comment if you will, send a super chat if you can. But there are people that are going to comment, and I can see it, that there is also the overlay, specifically when it comes to those in maybe the juvenile justice system, of poverty and economic challenges on top of fatherlessness that kind of coexist
Right.
to produce those outcomes. However, I think you're right when and I know you're right with the trends in the 70s coming forward. It has also crept up the economic ladder where you're seeing a lot more divided homes, if you will, in middle class socioeconomic brackets, let's say, particularly along the lines of racial and ethnic groups. Now, we're going to speak specifically about our American experience. I know you guys are watching from all over the world, so we're going to talk about the American experience and more specifically focused on the African American experience. So there will be variations of what fatherlessness looks like depending on where you live around this world. But I'm going to go into the middle class experience where we're seeing more and more people raised, although with economic means, by single parents. Why do you think that trend has emerged over the last, say, 20, 30, 40 years, as you've pointed out, where it's not just those of us in American society that are economically, very challenged and traditionally experience lower marriage rates? Why has that trend become more pervasive among, I guess, the higher social classes in the U.S.?
So to be succinct, you're saying, why do I feel that the need, or more or less the exoneration of marriage and family, has declined? Is that what you're
Yes,
asking?
what I'm saying is I'm trying to dovetail that what we described just now might be, attributed to also socioeconomic challenges. And what I'm saying is it's not just a socioeconomic challenge now. I think lack of men in the home has crept up the socioeconomic ladder.
Right. I see your point.
You can just,
Right.
what you said in general in terms of why you see this trend.
Well, listen, it's a very nuanced question. There are a myriad of factors that I think play into the dynamics of the lack of increasing fathers or having fathers in the home. I think liberal policies definitely play a role. I think the sexual revolution played a role into the de-evolution of the traditional family. And I think there's been an onslaught, Suzette Speaks, on heteronormative masculinity that's played a role as well. I've always said, Suzette, you hail from a very traditional home in a traditional country, from the great state or the great country of Jamaica, where, patriarchy and tradition is normal. But there's been an onslaught and assault on, Black men since we got into this country, and it's got precipitously worse since the 70s. So I think, in my mind, I think many of our women were compromised. I think they were compromised by liberal policies that said that they didn't have power and that our men oppressed them, where I would say respectfully that Black men never had the power to oppress Black women at the macro level. Macro meaning at the policy level. We didn't have the power to do it. We were all subjects of the same issue. We were muse and beast of burden. Black men and Black women were all part of the struggle. But somehow our women got caught up in this nebulous ideal that, Black men oppress them. And I've always said before, Suzette, that, if we're talking about domestic issues are endemic to all ethnic groups. It's not more or less just to Black men. In Indian homes, white homes, they all played a role sometime in uncivil discourse. But I think for the most part, Suzette, I think the sexual revolution played a role. I think liberal indoctrination played a role. I think the constantly erasing of the image of the Black man.
Here's a passive income online business that you haven't heard of that allows you to be free. You know about making
Played a role, and that assault on the Black man has been going on for years, and I think it has increased astronomically over the last couple of years. And I think part of also, Suzette, is that we tend to more or less, how can I say it? We tend to gravitate to swag culture instead of gravitating to good, decent men. And so we looked over a generation of good, decent brothers for swag. And so when you choose swag over substance, sadly, you will suffer the recompense of your era. And I think that's what we're seeing now, in my broader opinion.
Awesome. And I want you guys to leave commentary. I've seen some of this, especially when it comes to, and we're going to get to the impacts just shortly, but I do want to set the table and just talk about how we got here. We see a couple commenters, RM is saying preach. I saw that a lot of financial independence playing a role of women, and how the trend of the feminist movement and the, what should I call it, the feminist revolution has led to, as you're talking about, not only just the more money, but the difference of thinking, and the thinking and the valuation of what it means to include or to have a man in one's life, and the place he should have in your life, I think, more importantly. So I do think this is right. And I agree with you, Miss AKA Lady. Nice to see you. Thank you so much. I also have your question here. A lot of us were raised by single moms. If you had two parents, you were lucky. So how are we supposed to fully understand a marriage relationship? This is, I think, also a trend, because if you have and I can't speak for it because again, I've only seen two parents, but I have anecdotally heard, and y'all can correct me, that once you do not have a dad, it can be more difficult to navigate relationships. That's why
Right.
I posed the question
Right.
initially. That's what the
Right.
discussion was like. And then I saw this is again non-scientific. I put it as a question on my Instagram, on my Facebook, and on my LinkedIn. You know, do you guys think there will be a reduced impact on a relationship? And several of the people that answered, I happen to know personally. And I'm like, okay, they didn't grow up with a dad. They didn't grow up with a dad. They didn't grow up with a dad. And they said, no, they don't think there's an impact. So I'm curious, like I said, based on what your practical experience or experience as a practitioner has shown versus, you know, what we may think and again, there are exceptions to rules, and people also have different levels of resilience. So I'm not going to try no one size.
No. You're 100% correct. Resilience definitely plays the role, but resilience is not the rule; it's the exception to the rule. There's a concept that we use in the clinical world called resiliency theory, and basically it says that there are some people, Suzette, that can supersede the norm that they're in, but that's not the rule. That's an exception, and that person just have something intrinsically within themselves that supersede the norm. But we should never make we should always make the rule the bar or the measuring stick. We should never make the how can I say it, the exception to the rule the norm. And so if I ever did a show, Suzette, I would title the show "What My Daddy Forgot to Tell Me," and I would say that because I think when girls are in homes where they see strong masculine fathers, then they come into a relationship not fighting their man for power, but they know how to cooperate better. But when you're in a relationship where you've never seen a masculine man, you've never seen a masculine father more or less give guidance and instruction, then in that home, because you're so used to being self-sufficient, you have a hard time more or less giving that man the power to be the man in the relationship. So it's always a jousting, Suzette, for power. It's jousting for power because you've never respected masculinity. One of the reasons why many men are beginning to look at traditional women from other countries, you know, maybe like Jamaica, they're looking from some Afro-Latin countries, from the Caribbean, because they're looking for traditional women, because men at their core are traditional and masculine. So a masculine man is not going to fight with you for power. He's going to do one or two things. He's going to tolerate until you get an extra strategy. He's going to check you, or he's going to get rid of you. Now, that's why I say it depends on if he's a masculine man or if he's a cream puff. If he's a cream puff, you know, he'll be egalitarian and he'll go along and get along. Let
me add, and I don't mean to interrupt. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. I also think there's a generational shift, because the Gen X and older, I think there was, especially among African-American men, an understanding or commitment to stay in a marriage, even if they were removed from kind of like what you're saying.
And some of you guys are millennials and zennials. Would you agree that Zennial and millennial men are not prone to get married, but also to stay the course? If you feel that's the case, I need you guys to hit one. But because, you know, some talk about an urban revival where we need to get the community on point, but many men of the millennial and zennial generation, they don't tolerate what Gen X's and baby boomers tolerated. One, because they have been conditioned to tolerate it, and it is move on. So that could be good and bad, depending on how you look at it.
The masculinity or the exertion of masculinity in their own homes.
Mm-hmm.
My dad and several other of my uncles, etc. I think there were times and seasons where they were able to exert it more than others. Mm-hmm. But particularly moving to America, roles changed because women had an easier job as teachers and nurses to get into the U.S. system.
Right.
So all of a sudden, the breadwinning switch roles.
Right.
And I was like, wow, I see it. And I could, as even a child, see the difference of influence. I'll tell you one story, and I almost got busted in my mouth by my mom when I said it. I might have been in middle school. Right. And I was in a school with very diverse school, a lot of Jewish kids and such. Mm-hmm. And I remember, okay, yes, for the pounds. Thank you, Trish. See you, darling. I said to a girl invited me to a sleepover. And I said, this was when we was on the phone on the wall, no cell phone, so a phone on the wall. And I was like, I got to wait till my mom come home because she wears the pants. I said that. Mm-hmm. I said that as a little girl.
Right.
And I remember my dad overheard me, and I was like, oh, and he didn't do that. And then when my mom came home, oh my God, bust up. You think she was like, your dad has to be so strong to let me do what I do. And don't you ever, my mom gave me the worst dressing down for that.
Right.
But again, in the oversimplification of a child's mind, I just knew. I was like, well, my mom's in charge now. That's what I thought. That's what I thought.
Right.
Thank God she corrected me. But I will say that to say that my that generation, my dad's generation, was far more would say they will endure. They could endure marriage. This young generation, they're not doing that.
They're not doing it right.
As soon as they feel that, or not say as soon as, but I'm just saying they are not conditioned or have the mindset to say that I'm going to play a secondary role or I'm going to be emasculated in a sense and stay. They're not going to do that. They have a different understanding of how they, and I'm again, broad brushstroke, see the role of men as a man in the household. So can you talk a little bit about that generational difference as well?
Well, yeah, that generational differences has been something that's been permeating for a while. I would say maybe for the boomers, but after the boomers, where men have felt like they had to joust for power. And I do agree with you that a lot of men are saying that they're not going to do it anymore. You know, the Lyndon B. Johnson administration, especially affirmative action, those social programs and those social rights were supposed to be given to black men. But black men never got the power to have those social programs to become the better versions of themselves and also to be the leaders in their homes. So, as I said, simultaneously, we gave our women the power at the behest of our men, you know, the men that built this country, the men that endured Jim Crow racism, the men that more or less were safeguards and pillars for our women to protect them, the men that were complicit in the schools that were built. They were called the Wall World schools by Jews, but we played a role in building infrastructure for our families. And so, I agree with you now that a lot of men are not going to tolerate it because they don't see the benefit of it. Now marriage rates are actually plummeting, Suzette. And a lot of men don't even see the benefit of getting married either because they feel like that what they want from a traditional perspective, many women see it as slavery or they see it as something that's subservient. So a lot of men are saying, what are the benefits of getting married? And you're correct. Gen X men, baby boomers and Gen X men tolerated it more so than the men of this generation are going to tolerate it now. And so it's gotten to a point now that we've been left in a quagmire where the roles are not clear, where the men don't know where they stand in the relationship because they feel powerless. And to the point that I think a lot of times the things that women thought that, you know, they wanted as far as having a man that's subservient, on a psychic level, they don't even respect the man that's subservient to them because most women, by nature, in my opinion, only respect power and strength. So it's caused a lot of consternation in the relationships that we're having now. And I think it's to the point that, you know, I don't see this thing turning around, Suzette, for another 10, 15, 20, or maybe even 30 years. It's going to be generations before it get back on par. Because
so much parts of that. Go ahead, sir.
Right. Because Suzette, for a man to feel like he's empowered, he got to feel like he has power in the relationship. The masculine is doing, the feminine is being. And so when a man is conditioned to do, you know, I always give, you know, the man the symbolism of the sun. When you think about the sun, Suzette, the sun symbolizes warmth, but also illumination. The sun for the man as it relates to his son is to illuminate him on the right path to doing what's right as a man. But the son, as it relates to giving life to the daughter, is to give her the warmth. Women by nature are very insular. They have to receive emotion.
So, you want to get hired before summer ends? The hottest tech companies are desperate.
Emotion. But men need direction and guidance on how to be a man. So it takes a very cerebral man that's more or less know who he is, more or less comforted by a panel or a discussion of elders to give those men the rights of manhood, to keep them fortified and strong. But we don't have that anymore. There was a time where there was a rite of passage where the elders would more or less guide the young men into manhood, but they don't have that. So many times in relationships, men defer power at the behest of the ego or the psyche of a woman. And when he deferred that power, that woman doesn't respect him on a subconscious or conscious level. Many times she will abhor him and she'll tolerate him until she get rid of him. But she don't respect him. And so I'm trying to teach men that women only respect power and strength. But if you're in a society, in a community where masculinity is seen as toxic and not great, then how can we give the women what they need, which is the protection as it relates to her femininity? And how can you give the man what he needs, the protection as it relates to his ego as a man? It's a dual synchronicity. You protect his six, which is his back, he'll protect your six. But the point is now, because of liberal policies in my mind, Suzette, there is a nefarious attack on not only the family, the American family, but also on heteronormative masculinity. And it's gotten worse, in my opinion, in these last couple of years.
There's so much there. I'm going to shift to the comments just a second. And again, thank y'all. This is the Culture Clinic.
And that's what men are beginning to say. Men, by and large, are beginning to say that there's an attack on masculinity, more or less heteronormative masculinity. Anything that's seen as masculine and strong is seen as toxic. And I think what many men are saying to themselves is they're getting frustrated with it because it more or less reduces their ability to be men. Men are at their best where they're in environments where they can be men and not have their power tested, but also have their position tested in the relationship, because men, guys, and ladies do things based on hierarchy.
Illuminating us on some of the reasons why we are seeing this trend before we get into the impact of this trend. So we're talking about social programs. For those of you from other countries, if you don't understand what we're talking about welfare in the United States and how many of those programs required that there be no man in the house in order to get the economic security. Many men left, stepped back, and then you had these single women head of households, and how it never really shifted back. It really never shifted back. It kind of pushed the persons who were now, persecuted by the drug war and all these things, and kind of kept him outside of his own house. But what I want to drill down on some of what you just said at the end there, women, perhaps to their own detriment, we're going to say in a broad stroke, in terms of feminist ideology, broad stroke, that trying to, what is the word, criticize masculinity or diminish masculinity may produce an environment where you're missing the very thing that you desire.
Right.
I'm like, women, drop a comment if you want a strong male leader of your home. Drop a comment. Give me a why. Yes, I'm looking for a strong male leader of my home. So I think there's that other piece that the Culture Clinic.
And thank God sisters like Suzette Speaks get it. She gets it. She gets it, and she understands the importance of having a man. Listen, I'm going to do a show soon, guys, talking about the dark side of beauty. And many women are beginning to realize that their degrees, that nice house on the hill, their cars, it really means nothing in the greater context of life, because human beings were meant to be social creatures. And when you come into a relationship where you devalue the man at the expense of exonerating or aggrandizing yourself, it makes that man feel like he has no place in your life. Men are at their best when they're more or less praised and rewarded and more or less respected. Good men, not bad men. We're talking about good, hardworking, solid men. And good can be very subjective, but in the greater context of human reasoning, I'll let you use your own mind what it means to be good. And so when men can get those outcomes, then they feel better and you have more stable societies. But you cannot browbeat a community of men and don't raise them and raise our boys and then expect our men to be competent and whole. It doesn't work that way. Social conditioning is nature and nurture. They most coalesce together.
Is described that since the 70s, the mindset towards a heteronormative masculine man has been adversarial.
Right.
Has been the goal, some would say, some would argue, some pundits might say, to remove that, which I say presence. I don't know if I'm saying the right word, not only on macro, but on the micro level within your home, as well as within the political and economic and social structures of the country. I don't know. Is there conspiracy theorists in the building? I don't know. I'm not saying it's conspiracy because it's real in many ways. But then who's behind it is a whole nother discussion. But elaborate on that, because I think people. Yes, go ahead.
Well, we've been seeing this, Suzette. You go to the educational system, they're not, you don't see nowhere near as many male teachers, one, but you don't see a lot of male men in leadership, especially black men, is principles. I was going to go to school at one point to go back and get my license to become a principal. But even as a principal, you don't see strong men in the leadership role as principals. So what we've done, we have more or less conditioned our boys not to see men in power and authority. We've conditioned them to see women in power and authority, which in essence teaching these boys to get what's called negative socialization. And so when you constantly got a barrage where you're constantly exonerating the girls at the behest of the boys, then it causes social fragmentation. And so I saw in schools, you didn't see principals. You didn't see principals that were black men or more or less men as much. I used to see it a lot when I was a kid, growing up as a kid. But something happened after, around middle school to high school where male principals began to dissipate. And so what I think what we've done on a negative psychic level is teach boys to defer power, to look up to women as the power base. That's why a lot of times in relationships, men give their power away, Suzette, because they never had fathers to teach them how to be men. Now listen, there are some good women that have done noble jobs because they had other men around them to guide their sons into relationships and how to teach them to be men. But a woman cannot teach a man how to be a man. She can maintain him in his manhood, but she can't teach him to be a man. No more than me as a man can teach a girl how to be a woman. I can maintain a young lady into her womanhood, but I can't teach her how to be a woman because being a woman is very intricate. Being a man is about hills and valleys, victories and failures. Being a man is about more or less the practicum of masculinity versus the intrinsic wiring of being a man. So being a man is about you have to go through it. And if you go through and you come out on top, then you earn the right of manhood. And so, so all of those things play a role. I think our boys have been conditioned not to see men in powerful positions. That's why, Suzette, when men go abroad and travel abroad to date other women, the women love American men because they say they're so kind. But they also say that y'all tolerate what our men don't tolerate because in their countries, the men are the men. They set the standard. If you get out of line, you get checked because the men in those countries are men. They don't tolerate what American men tolerate. American men, in my mind, have been very emasculated. And a lot, not only emasculated, but their image have been reduced as well. Shout out to my man Michael Green for the $5 super
That's a
sticker.
bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal,
Michael
right?
Green said for bringing
That's a bet,
information
right? That's a
to
deal,
giving us
right?
men.
That's a
Thank you
deal,
for
right?
that $5 cash app. Thank you, sir. And guys, once again, please share the content. If you're not shared the content, share this content. Let's get the message out as we continue to empower our men, because I'm a firm believer that if you empower the men, then on the backside, we will empower our women. When you empower your men directly, indirectly, the women are empowered because they get the manifestation of the men that they're intrinsically wired to accept. Women tend to like masculine men. They can say what they want to say, but in general, I would say that most women want a masculine man that's going to love her, guide her, check her when she's wrong, love her when she's right, give her attention, but when she gets wrong or disrespect him as a man, that he checks her. And I think most women would want that unless she's a woman that wants to run a relationship. All of it is because they've been silenced and shamed into silence. And what it's done is caused them to implode from within. And that's why when you allow a man to implode from within, Suzette, if it's not taken care of, that implosion become an explosion. And that explosion can look like different things under different situations. So we have to allow men to be men if the women want to get the protection that they want.
I think the argument can be made, and thank you for the pounds invisible car with the super sticker. Right. Thank you for showing some love. There can be an argument made, and again, not my personal opinion, but that in trying to equalize or create equity in the society for women in a society where we can look back, there was none. Talking about with access to political power, with access to economic power, et cetera, for the first, couple centuries of our great republic. In the exercise of trying to create equity and access to power, there has been maybe an overcorrection. And again, this is just food for thought.
Right.
When you create an environment where you're now, the majority of people in colleges or going to college are women now, and I'm mad at that, but let's just talk about the implications of that. So you have a lot of educated women, you have a lot of women with high earning power. And do you have enough male counterparts to suitably fit the needs, if you will, of those women who are going to come out and hopefully want to, or some may not, but majority will want to come out and start a family. But if we created a social conditioning for the last 20 years, 25 years, beyond equity and gone to, for argument's sake, another level where it's almost exclusionary and diminishing of the male presence in schools, boardrooms, etc. And again, I'm not saying, because most of the people that still run our country are men. Let's just be very serious and very straight up about that. However, in many levels of society, have we now created, and again, this is just for argument's sake, a scenario where you have now almost removed the very person or the half of the equation that you're going to need when you get all these educated women and women who have the ability to do, such incredible things. Where are the male counterparts? Have we overcorrected? Have we done or not been, I guess, astute enough to see that we might be overcorrecting in a way?
I definitely think that we overcorrected because we saw normal masculinity as something bad, and we tend to equivocate all masculinity as being the boogeyman. I saw in the school system, Suzette, where where black boys were more or less placed in special ed all the time for this basic, behavior. Then there was Latin boys, and then it was white boys. I saw it all the time when I was teaching school. They never gave the black boys the same amount of credence as they gave other ethnic groups. And they were placed in special.
Some of them.
They vilified some of them, right? Yes, ma'am. Right.
I've seen that in the
Yes,
American
ma'am.
school system.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
They were vilified more so than the girls, because see, many times people expect boys to act like the girls in the classroom, to be compliant and soft and agreeable, but that's not how men think. We're wired to be, many times, especially with testosterone coursing through our veins, to be boys, rambunctious, bouncing around, and and so a lot of times, boys were more or less, how can I say it? They were more or less targeted at a higher rate than the girls, not only for special education, but also for more punitive issues. And so to take it back to where we are allowing, when we're talking about, I think that we overcorrect. No doubt we overcorrected, because a lot of times, Suzette, that power that you're talking about, it was never necessarily black men in power. So it always goes back to this same predicament again. Were there males in power? By and large, no doubt. But was it black men? And I would say that by and large, it was never really black men. White men were definitely in power, but not black men at a high level that it needs to be. So we always equivocate black men. It's like the black man is the Oreo, the cream in the middle of the cookie. He doesn't have anything to do with none of it, but he tends to get pushed into all of it. And so what you're seeing now, Suzette, listen, boys are the warrior class. Your men are the warriors. The warriors are the protectors of the community, but you can't, if you don't raise your boys up to the same level that you're raising your girls, then how can we have a vibrant and a healthy community? We say black girl magic, black girl rock. Don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with it. But when are we going to say black boys rise? And then we get upset and mad when our boys are not reading at high levels. We get upset and mad when our boys are checked out. We get upset and mad when boys are playing video games. They have no interest, because we have not adequately empowered our boys to the same level that we need to empower our girls. When Obama came up with My Promise Keeper initiative, it was met with a bunch of criticism and condemnation. But then we wonder why our boys are not invigorated to feel good about their masculinity and to feel good about their ego. Boys are important too, as well as men. And so we can't say we love our men while we're trying to silence our men at the same time.
That is so true. I want to do a show just about that, sir, because I thank you, Barry Hamilton. I see you, Chemo. Thank you guys for holding up the stream and supporting. Thank you very much. The onslaught over the last 20 years, like I said, I thank God for my strong parents and what they were able to do in terms of counteracting some of the systemic, racially based, I could call it abuse, when it comes to my brother being a black male in the American school system. And so many others didn't have strong parents or parents that were available, parents who were working probably very hard,
Right,
but couldn't go
right.
to school and speak up. I saw
Right.
it with my own eyes.
Mhm.
Every time my mom tried to move my brother into, advanced classes, they would put him in woodwork. They would put him in
Right,
all kinds of
right.
stuff.
Mhm.
The guidance counselor told my mom, in high school, that my brother, who is very smart, my brother is a chiropractor, that he shouldn't be thinking about college. And my mom had to go down there and let her know, you setting him up for the sheriff, but I'm setting him up for college. So start again, ma'am. Come again, ma'am. And
Wow.
throughout his educational experience, it was very different from mine. The US educational system, many would agree with you in terms of, it is a place that women, particularly those who are just very cooperative, I guess was the word that you
Cooperative, right, exactly.
can
Right.
excel in.
Mhm.
And we're not necessarily judging children on their cognitive abilities. And not every school everywhere. This was my experience here in South Florida at a specific school. But it was, the grade was based on like behavior, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Right, 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 right. Mhm.
Pays for
Right.
almost good behavior, specifically in
Right.
schools that were predominantly with Black children.
Mhm.
It was not focused on the scholastic achievement as opposed
Right.
to behavioral conditioning. Do
Right.
you sit quietly and do work? As you say, most boys cannot do that.
Mm-hmm.
Most boys, because of their nature, let's argue, will be much more comfortable in a kinetic learning environment, in the running and the jumping and the doing, as you said, being a doer.
Right.
So even as a whole, there is a school of thought that is critical of our kind of conditioning and what the skills are that are being rewarded by the way most schools are set up in the United States. And most of the people that suffer from the way the schools are set up are the boys, and particularly the Black boys.
And you're 100%. I would say you're a million percent correct. You gotta understand that when it comes down to racial white supremacy, women are not seen as a threat of progress. It was always the men. I went through it, Suzette. I went through it a lot, many times. They would say, "Oh, you speak well." I'm like, "What the hell that's supposed to mean?" I'm 6'6" and dark skinned. Having a bald head doesn't help. I had principals that would tell me, you're very intimidating. You're very, very powerful. Goofy stuff. I got it all the time. So I always felt like I was a lion in the cage. I always felt like I couldn't be myself. I had to more or less tap dance, and it was hard because that's not my nature. My personality is very strong. And, many times I would tell the principals and the teachers, I respect all men, but I bow to none. I don't think there's a man on this planet that I think is better than myself. That's just me. Do I respect every man and all men? No doubt, from the short ones to the tall ones. But do you think I'm gonna bow and placate who I am as a man to appease other men? Nah, don't. Shout out to my man James Turner for that $25 super sticker.
That's a bet, right? That's a deal.
Thank you,
right?
brother.
That's a deal,
I
right?
appreciate that.
That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right? Got 5 on it.
Shout out to my man James Turner. Thank you, sir. Let me read this out real fast. James Turner said, "Hello, kosher, and welcome." And hello to the beautiful Suzette. My God, just getting to the stream late. You have to go back replay, man. You funny. Shout out to my dear sister Suzette Speaks. Suzette, I did I spoke in patois. I say you set picnic. You go there, child. I think I said it right. So you set picnic. So I think I said it right, Suzette. Let me know if I'm wrong, but you set picnic is in patois. So no doubt. Thank you, sweetie. I had to make sure I craft that specifically. That's that Leo swag. Leos, we always give a grand occasion. So shout out to you. So we're going to finish this conversation, and then, I'm going to drop the link. Don't do that. That goes against my nature as a man. So I went through it as a man, and many times, Suzette, what they tend to focus on is athletics instead of academics, because in their mind, they don't think that Black men can be intelligent. And that goes back to that age-old adage that Black men or Black people are inferior. And it goes back to slavery. The women were allowed to read a lot faster than boys were. So this assault on men and masculinity has been going on for years. It's nothing new. It goes back to pre-antebellum slavery and also post-antebellum. The role for men to go to higher levels in academia is a lot harder. Yeah. And what they tend to like, Suzette, they tend to like more more placid or flaccid men, what I call more beta type men, that are agreeable. Oh yes, honey, yeah, I agree. That's not me. And it's caused me to have a lot of derailments in my career path because I'm very strong. I'm a strong man. Will I treat you right as a human being? Yes, but you can get checked. That's just how I operate. I just don't tolerate disrespect as a man. It's beneath me as a man to allow another man to dictate to me what to do. It goes against my nature. Maybe it's a Leo in me, but that's just how I operate.
Thank you for illuminating that. That is very important because I think all of this goes to, now my next question is going to be a little controversial because I want to know what you think about whether women have internalized, Black women, women of color, have internalized this viewpoint towards our own men. I think there are many that may argue that, and I've seen it a lot on the YouTube space. And I'm like, oh my God, so I think like that? I don't think I think like that. And again, it can be very subconscious.
Right.
But I'm hearing this theory about, women not valuing their own men, that on maybe a subconscious level, not seeing the value of the man is leading to the idea that, do I really need this person in my household as my husband and my leader? Or do I really believe he can be my husband and my leader? So what do you think? That you think there's like a trickle down effect within the psyche of even the women who desire, because Black women in our country, for the most part, a majority marry or want to marry a Black man. So what do you think about that? Do you think this kind of, social impact over the last, again, since the inception of our country, really, but that those type of negative, stereotypes have somehow, or perhaps, again, this is just a theory I'm seeing a lot of, seeped into the psyche of the very women who, we're seeking to make, partnerships with?
Yes, I agree with you 1,000,000%. Yes, I think some on a subconscious level and a very conscious level, they tolerate their men. They don't see their men as an icon of power. They tolerate them. I would even say, Suzette, that some see them as accessories to their agenda instead of seeing that man as the exemplar in their community and where she's going to follow his program and follow his plan as they work together. I said before in the past, if you protect him, he's going to protect you. If you protect his ego, he's going to protect you from the physical perspective. But watch this. Dr. William Glasser, Suzette, said, he's a psychoanalytic theorist that says that choices and the lack of choices cause people to have behaviors. Needs drive behaviors, Suzette. I'm going to say it again. Needs drive behaviors. And sometimes it can be an unconscious motivation. You're not aware of it. But the prevailing principle for those needs driving behaviors, according to Dr. William Glasser, was power, choice, freedom, survival, and fun. If a man is not getting those needs met, Suzette, then guess what? He's going to get them from somewhere else. And so that's why you begin to see this evolution of men beginning to focus on themselves, because they feel like they're constantly at war with their women. And it's not just a Black woman thing. I think it's a Western issue. But I think it's more prevalent, more or less, in our communities many times, Suzette, because, Black men were never seen as a power differential. And I think it's a percentage of our women abhor that because Black men never had the power of their white predecessors. So therefore, I think a lot of times our Black men were seen as insignificant. But I'm going to say kudos to your mom for respecting your father, because many times back in the past, Suzette, when the women would go to school to be teachers to get their professionals, the men would stay back and work on the farm to support the women that go to school. And so men have done great sacrifices for the betterment and for the establishment of the Black community many times. But many times, Suzette, it was not given the same reciprocity in return. So I do think that there is an unconscious pathology as it relates to honoring Black men, because let's think about it. Many have never seen true masculinity in the family. And when you constantly hear your mom say, I'm strong and independent and I don't need a man, then what does that do to her from a psychic level? She see him as an accessory instead of seeing him as somebody that's going to lead her and lead the family and lead the community.
Ooh, deep, deep, deep. I see so many in the comments. Y'all get busy in the comments, ladies, again.
Shout out to my man, to the narc perspective. I call that brother the little hobbit. He's a Leo like me. Thank you, brother, for being so generous on today, man. Thank you for that 5, man. Thank you, sir. I really
appreciate it. Right? That's a bet, right? That's a deal, right? That's a deal, right?
We're going to finish this discussion. I'm going to drop the link in a few minutes because Suzette and I had a very powerful show. It was a great show, and I look forward to bringing Suzette back at some point to finish these discussions as it relates to transforming their identity and also transforming the mind of so many, because many need this. That's
fire,
what they really need, the fire
for your mind. The kosher clinician.
They need to be illuminated, and they need to burn out the negative toxicity that they have more or less accumulated over the time as it relates to negative socialization and also negative social conditioning.
And I want to hear your opinion. Men, I want to hear your opinion. There are so many people that I see chiming in that I want to read. I'm going to get to it. I see another super chat, but yes, I wanted to get to where things, Miss AKA Lady, thank you for showing the love. No comment, just pure love. Thank you for supporting the stream and this type of content. Appreciate you so much. So when we are getting into now the impacts, I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit because I need you to understand origins. Again, all things don't apply to all people. Right. We are theorizing for some extent. There are proven studies in other, that we can bring into another conversation about this. But we want to kind of lay the foundation as to why before we get into the what. So why and where did this come from? And where will this trend lead if we continue to see it? So I want to now, sir, pivot a little bit more into the impacts and how you've seen, both from your time earlier in your career in the juvenile justice as a licensed, in the juvenile justice system as a licensed clinical social worker and educator, and now as a clinician. Can you talk a little bit about, I want to go into the physical impacts, the emotional impacts, and the cognitive impacts that we see when there is no father present. So why, again, we can go on and on because we've only touched the tip of the iceberg as to why we're seeing some of the shifts in terms of marital rates across, the board here in the United States and even across the world. Those of us who are in westernized countries, and a lot of people in other countries say they're seeing a lot of Western influence.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to call it right now. I think I found the single biggest productivity hack of 2021. It's this Google Chrome extension called Speechify.
Coming through. So we'll see what impact that has. And if it doesn't serve us, again, we got to reevaluate. But beyond that, let's talk now about the impacts. Do you feel that there is a marked impact of not having a father? And let's just say in a broad way, how? When a child does not grow up with a father in the home, as an adult, what are some of the typical impacts, if any, that you would I know this is so broad. It can be so many things. So I'm like, how do I chew a little piece of this elephant? Tell me where we start when it comes to impact.
Listen, you're right. We touched on it a little earlier, but there was a study, Suzette, that was done talking about juvenile elephants and then having the elder bull elephants in the community. And so when the bull elephants were out of the communities, then the juvenile elephants were very rogue, they were very aggressive and very violent. But the counterpart to that study was that when they brought the elder elephants back in the community, they were able to ground the bull elephants. So back to point, when you think of it from a biological level, I think from a biological level that when you have fathers, kids more or less have the proclivities to eat more healthy, have more nutritious meals, and have the resources to get the things that they need, not only for them physically, as it relates to their development from an emotional aspect, because kids that are born in poverty many times don't feel adequate when they don't have the proper resources to look to part from their peers. So biologically, I think with a father in the home, they can get better nutrition because they got more resources, but also from an economical perspective, they have clothes and shelter, and it helps them more or less escape some of the ravages of inner city malaise. From the cognitive perspective, it gives boys and girls identity. Boys need to have an identity. And so you need a very strong masculine father, Suzette, to give a man identity. When a man has an identity, he feels good about himself, and he's not willing to more or less tolerate disrespect from any man or woman, but also it gives him the power to push through some of the different things that he's going through as a man. So let's think about it from the theological. Because as a clinician, we look at things from the bio, which is the body, the social, which is the environment, the biosocial, biopsycho, bio, which is the body, psycho, which is the mind, social, the environment, and also the spirit. So let's look at it from the spiritual perspective as it relates to Christianity. When Jesus was on his mission to do the will of the Father, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, his mission was not his temporary pain, but his mission was to do the will of the Father. When boys are in homes where they have strong masculine men, they're able to push through the barriers that more or less confront them. They don't use excuses as a crutch not to be successful. When boys have an identity outside of their pain, then they become better versions of themselves. Because just like Christ, when he was in the garden, he realized that pain was temporary, but glory is forever. So men would never maximize their glory if they're still stewing in the temporary issues of their pain. So when you have a father helped that boy push through the temporary barriers of his pain to reach the pinnacle of his glory. But now you don't have that because many boys don't have strong fathers in the home. And, they don't have the guidance that they need to be better versions of themselves. That's why we need women to support masculine men and allow them to be the men in their homes instead of fighting them on a regular basis. So those components play a role from the bio, which is the body, psycho, which is the mind as it relates to identity, social as it relates to environment, because economics, one of the greatest indicators of impacting the mental health of a child is incessant poverty. When you're in a two-parent home where you have two people working, then it can help that child do better because he's in a different social class, to say the least. And it also benefits the girls because the girls don't have to go looking for love from different guys, because the father is the first one that's going to show his daughter love, and it show her what it looks like to get love from a man. If that adds clarity to the conversation.
We're going to add some comments. I'm going to drop the link, y'all, because I want y'all to come up. We're going to have to do a lightning round because I see so many people commenting. So many people have a lot of, and this is a good thing, an opinion on this subject matter. And I want to start with some folks coming up. If you have a personal story about growing up without your father, and how you think it impacted you or did not impact you. Thank you, Miss AKA Lady, saying, not having my father shape me into a woman who wants.
Stop the stream that I did with the lovely and the talented Suzette. Thank you, Suzette, for that awesome commentary. It was an awesome stream. She's definitely an intellectual like myself, and I love having these conversations because these conversations, guys, are vital to the evolution of a new community. Now, listen, I said it earlier. I don't think that we will get back to that point maybe for generations from now. It's going to take years. I don't see it in my lifetime. It's not because I'm not hoping for seeing vibrancy of the Black community, but I just don't see it in my lifetime. Maybe generations, maybe 50 to 100 years from now. I don't know. Maybe after Christ come back, if you believe in theology. But the link has been dropped. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation about how fatherlessness has impacted you as a man, how fatherlessness has impacted you as a woman, how fatherlessness have caused some of you men to defer power instead of demanding power, and how fatherlessness for some of the women have caused women to look for power instead of more or less getting it from their father, which is the power broker that teaches them to get ready and prepare themselves to get ready for their husband in the future. Because I'm a firm believer that a woman cannot respect a masculine man unless her father knows how to broker power in that relationship, which basically means that he teaches her to respect that man's authority when he give her over to that man to be his wife, because the father is supposed to give the girl over to the man to be under his protection and also to be under his umbrella. But, that's an anomaly. You don't see that at all in many communities. We live in a very matrilineal community, a very matriarchal community where you don't see it. And because you don't see it, then many times in the relationship, the woman has been conditioned already to come into the relationship saying that I'm strong and independent and I don't need a man, which in essence is a thinking error called magnification. The magnification of the woman, the minimization of the man, which in essence causes social chaos and causes mental fragmentation. And so we need societies and communities where men are allowed to be men. When men are at their best, women, they will give you their best. You protect his ego, he's going to take care of you if he's a good man. I'm not talking about men that abuse power. I'm not talking about dusty men. I'm not talking about men that are beta men. I'm talking about masculine men that are striving to be the best versions of themselves. The only thing we need is a cheerleader, a feminine oscillator, an aphrodisiac that's going to more or less emit perfume into the psyche of a man. When a man can get that on the continuum, then he becomes the better version of himself. So the link has been dropped. Let's have a conversation. And shout out to Suzette Speaks. Thank you for being my guest. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for allowing me to come on. And Suzette, we will do a show again at some point. But the link has been dropped, guys. Suzette, if you want to pop in for a minute, you can. Or if some of the men want to pop in and more or less reflect on the conversation that I had with the lovely, and the talented Suzette Speaks, we can have a conversation because we forgot to ask men what they want. Michael Jackson did a song back in the 90s. He said that they don't really care about us. And that song could be more or less equated to how men see themselves in relationships. So let's have a conversation because this is a dialogue, not a monologue. And until you guys pop on, I'm going to run this commercial about the importance of male mental health in this turbulent time called America. Are you a victim of brokenness and despair? A broken man is a hopeless man, and a hopeless man is a very dangerous man. Many times, many of you young men that are listening come from homes that are very toxic and very dysfunctional. And because of that, many of you have deferred your power in many ways to the point it's led over into your social life and many times led over into your relationships. If you guys are dealing with mental health pathologies, conscious and unconscious, come see me at kosherclinician@gmail.com. That's kosherclinician@gmail.com. It's important that you deal with your mental health in order to be a better person for yourself, your loved ones, and also your community. But because mental health is often stigmatized, many of you often suffer in silence. Don't be a victim in silence. And see me once again at kosherclinician@gmail.com. And I need you guys to remember this. If it ain't 7, it ain't kosher. If it ain't kosher, it ain't right. There are 7 steps that a man must go through in order to become an optimized male. And male mental health is one of those elements that's paramount to the functioning of a man. Be well. All right, guys, that is a message, the commercial that I had devised and made, talking about the importance of mental wellness in the Black community. Listen, many times we celebrate many things in our society. We minimize the importance of mental health awareness. There's a young lady that took her life. Bless her heart, she was from the Tar Heel State, and she was a model from North Carolina, went to Wake Forest, and she ended her life recently. And so we don't talk about that. We celebrate, bravado, we celebrate fame, we celebrate money, but all of those things are temporary. Human beings are at their best when they're involved with other human beings that are giving them positive influence and more or less impacting their life in a very positive way. But because we become so technical, at one point we were more or less communal, but we're becoming more isolated to the point that we don't have communities to influence our boys and our girls. And because of that, you're beginning to see the social chaos and the breakdown mentally of so many people. Here in the Tar Heel State, therapists are actually needed at an all-time high because of this current virus, but also because of the lack of fathers in the home. And that goes back to some of our women choosing the same percentage of dusty men, because I'm a firm believer that a large quotient of our men are actually invisible. So shout out to my man Top Gun for the $5 super sticker. Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it. Thank you, sir. This is a dope dialogue, an uncovered gem.
That's a deal, right? That's a deal.
It's time to build our Black boys. I might even get a T-shirt made and start a show called Black Boys Rise. It's time to rise and to build our boys up so that they can more or less be the warrior class. A class or society is only strong as the warrior in that class. The Chinese know that. The Chinese have begun to more or less teach their men the rights of manhood, to the point they're saying that they're getting them away from liberal thought, but getting them back to thinking like warriors. Because China, at some point, in my opinion, is going to be the next superpower. They already are a superpower. And our boys are not ready for that kind of mental duress that it's going to take in order to lead. Many men lost their lives on the battlefields of Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. Many lost their lives in the Vietnam War. But those men were built different. They were more stoic, but they were built different. Many suffered from mental illness in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder. But we don't talk about what the stresses that men go through. We always pathologize the behaviors of men instead of looking at the underlying culprit that's associated with it. So once again, let's have a conversation, guys. The link has been dropped. Suzette Speaks said, if a woman doesn't have a good relationship with her father, or if he was not present, what can she do to repair her mind and spirit in order to not allow the experience to impact relationships? Well, that's a good question, dear. I would say that she has to do a lot of self-introspection, one. She has to do a lot of self-introspection, one. I would say if she get a therapist, she need to get a therapist that's a traditional male conservative therapist that more or less understands the importance of heteronormative masculinity. And then I would say that she needs to uncover so that she can recover by more or less looking at those thinking arrows that cause her, Suzette, to have the mindset that she's having as it relates to the man in the relationship. When she can get to a point where she's able to do the shallow work to more or less look within herself and start more or less systematically breaking down those barriers in her mind and also in her heart, then she can become a more fuller and more evolved woman. Now listen, those behaviors do not more or less dissipate or go away overnight. It does take time because Rome was not built overnight. But if she's willing to say, I have a problem, and then more or less willing to do the work to eradicate those issues associated with how she sees men, then she can slowly uncover. The lady said, can't think of her name, but she was talking about, Erykah Badu talked about the bag lady. She can slowly uncover so that she can get to the pinnacle of her success so that she can be ready for love. Because you can't love a man as relates to masculinity until you respect him and honor him as a man. So let's have a conversation because these conversations are very vital and these conversations are needed. So guys, hold on for a minute. I need to get a charger because this thing is going to shut down in a minute. So hold tight, guys. Give me a minute. The link has been dropped. Give me a minute, guys. I got to get my charger because the link has been dropped. So hold tight. All right, we're about to sign back in. We're going to have to finish this conversation, guys. Hold tight. And I hope that that's not too loud. All right, so let's have a conversation. If you guys can hear that music, let me know. The link has been dropped. I'm sure you guys can hear that music in the background. If you guys can hear the music in the background, hit 1. I'm going to read through some of these questions. And so shout out to King Kunta. We need to go get back to the hood and turn these women to wives. Well, I don't think too many guys will sign up for that, King Kunta, man. Yeah, many guys say they don't want to be the cleanup man. So I respect your position, though, brother. But I don't think brothers are trying to do that. But I don't knock a man that want to do it. That's what you feel like you want to do. By all means, do it. But I don't think that many men want to do that, especially brothers that don't have kids. But I'm not knocking no one that more or less believe that. So, hey. So shout out to the brothers that want to do that. But I think men that don't have kids want to start their own family. So, but anyway, the link has been dropped. Let's have a conversation. Black Jacks, I would never tell a man to be a stepfather. But if they happen to come across a woman they think is worthy in most areas for you, don't shun her, right? If that's what you want to do, so be it. But I don't think that's what men are saying. I think men want to start their own family, but I'm not going to knock a man if that's what he want to do. Every man is different. Every man's mission is different. Every man's standards is different. So I don't knock a man for having standards, but I will say the men of our men have very low standards. They tolerate anything. They more or less deal with anything. They don't demand anything better because many times those men could get better if they only knew what their worth was. So the link has been dropped, guys. Let's have a conversation for a few more minutes before I get to the office. King Kunta, he on the stepdad brigade. He's on the stepdad brigade. So let's have a conversation, guys. The link has been dropped about the impact of not having a father in your life. This goes for the women as well, because some of you ladies have not had fathers in your lives. It's impacted your development to the point that many your development has been arrested if we think about it from the psychosocial stage of what's called identity versus role confusion. Erik Erikson was a psychosocial contemporary, and he talked about development. He talked about intimacy versus role confusion. Intimacy is when a person feels like they're in a healthy relationship and they're getting ready to move forward into the next stage, which is called generality versus stagnation. But if you have not more or less successfully went through that stage of your development can be arrested. Let me give a special shout. The NARC perspective, man. NARC is killing the game, man. NARC, man, listen, man, you are an awesome young brother, man. We got to do a show soon, NARC. NARC has been the sponsor of this stream, and I want to really thank NARC for the $5 super sticker. NARC said that being a stepdad is no joke. You're constantly competing and being compared to their ex. Yes, I agree with you, brother. And yeah, I don't necessarily advocate for that. If that's what a man want to do, more power to him. But I think men with no kids should get with women that have no kids and live their life on their own terms. If that's what a man want to do, then that's his business. But, I believe our men should have the best. And it is a constant cycle where you got to constantly prove yourself. And sometimes those women can go back and deal with their ex. So 9 times out of 10, a relationship like that, you're not going to be number one. It's going to be her children first, which they should be, her second, her job. You might come in 4th place. So who wants to do that? But once again, I don't knock a man for doing it if that's what he wants to do. More power to him. But shout out to NARC Perspective for being the, how can I say it, the sponsor of this chat. This brother has a big heart, I'm very generous like most Leos are. And also shout out to James Turner, and guys, look, it's always the same people that are giving. But if you have never donated to the channel, guys, donate to the channel if you like what I'm doing. If you don't have any money to give, I'm okay with that. Just share the content. Share the content, hit all notification buttons, and help me grow this channel so it can reach epic proportions, because we need to more or less start focusing on inner healing. We focus on junk too many times instead of focusing on inner healing. Inner healing is needed when the junk will more or less pass away. You can have money, fame, and acclaim, but you still could be broken mentally and socially if you don't understand the things that are holding you back as a man. So shout out to the NARC Perspective, man. Let me give you an applause, young lion, because you always come through. You have a big heart, man. You have a service heart. And I don't want you, brother, to be a slave to mediocrity. I want you to live your life, NARC Perspective, on purpose. I don't want you to be a subject to your own mind. I want you to love yourself, young man, and get the best outcomes that are needed so that you can live your life happy, because your time on this earth is limited. So shout out to you, brother, for always being so generous and warm and always giving to this platform as I try to bring mental health awareness and mental clarity to this conversation. So real quick, guys, in another 10 to 15 minutes, I would love to hear, you guys add to the conversation. Tom Gunn said he's vigorously trolling. I would love for you guys to add to the conversation because this conversation is needed. So the link has been dropped, and let's have a conversation before I leave in a few minutes. Shout out to my man, Blackjack. Does anyone know if your donations are tax write-offs? Well, they take out money, Blackjack. I believe they take it out. They already take off 30% with these super chats. So, when you give super chats, you don't get all the money anyway. I don't know what Cash App yet. I don't know. But Cash App is totally different. But nonetheless, I'm grateful, guys. So shout out to Blackjack for that $10 super sticker. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. But listen, the link has been dropped, guys. The link has been dropped. Let's have a conversation. To the ladies that are listening in the next 10 to 15 minutes, let's have a conversation before I get off stream and hit the road. Because I want to hear what our women are saying about or thinking about this conversation. Let's have a conversation. Curtis, pop in, brother. I think you're a therapist like myself. Pop in. Let's have a conversation. The link has been dropped. Let's have a conversation about the impact of fatherlessness and also identity issues that you continue to see with a lot of our kids. You know, Regina King's son went through a mental health crisis a couple of weeks ago, and his life has more or less, he took his life. And there was a time, guys, where, you know, suicide was not as high as it is now in the Black community. At one point, people of color were some of the most resilient people. But children now are not built like their great-great-grandmothers were. They were built different. They were very resilient. They knew how to deal with things. But once again, we become more isolated as a community. We become more isolated as a people. We are suffering, men and women, in silence because our identities have been more or less enmeshed in the computer. And it's led a lot of our kids not to have the adequate social skills that are needed. That's why it's so important for women to support their men. Because watch this, ladies, your beauty will fade at some point. Your beauty will fade at some point. Charm is vain. Beauty is very deceitful. But who can find a virtuous woman? Who can find a woman that can love that man through his hardship? Who can find a woman that got his back when he's not and when he's down on his luck? That's what men are looking for. Men are looking for a feminine oscillator, a woman that can oscillate the psyche of a man with her kindness, with her genuineness, a woman that knows how to harness her own female nature so that she does more or less sabotage the relationship. I'm a firm believer that a woman that can more or less keep her emotions in check and learn how to use her emotions to advocate for her family and her husband is a wise woman, but also a woman that really loves her man. Because a woman that can go against her emotion is a woman that's a disciplined woman. Because a woman's greatest vice is her emotions. And so love to a man is when you can love him outside of your emotions and your feelings. If she can corral her feelings for the benefit of respecting and honoring her man, then that's a good woman. And that's what men are looking for. They're looking for a woman that can be conditioned to say, I got to put my feelings aside for the sake of the relationship and for the sake of the family. So to the women that are listening, pop in. Let's have a conversation. In the meantime, thank you for MC Wellens and Recover and Relapse for the $10 super sticker. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. For that double $5. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kindness, your generosity, and always donated to this channel. Thank you, brothers. You know, it's the main ones. I really appreciate you guys. You guys have been with me on this journey for mental wellness, and I appreciate it. So the link has been dropped. I got about 10 minutes, guys. The link has been dropped. I know some of you guys are at work, but let's have a conversation as we give some fire for your mind. Let's have a conversation about this timely conversation and this timely discussion. So there we go. There goes the lovely and the talented Suzette Speaks. How you doing, dear? What's going on?
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, dear. How you doing? What's going on?
I was trying to I'm good. I was trying to let other people come up, but I was like, well, let me not hog all the space. But thank you for doing some of that rebroadcasting. We had a phenomenal conversation thanks to you.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Thanks
people still giving me feedback. So I'm grateful. I'm very grateful that you came on.
Right. So, Suzette, what did you get from that conversation? What did you get from the conversation?
In the meantime, thank you, MC Wellens and Recover and Relapse for the $10 super sticker.
There must be a delay.
I appreciate it.
I don't think it's on my side or.
Guys, if you have your YouTube on, make sure you turn it off. Pause.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if mine is on. 1 second.
Yeah, make sure y'all mute yourself on YouTube, please.
Oh yeah, mine has stopped.
Okay, Curtis, you got yours muted, brother?
Yeah, make sure you turn off your sound.
Okay, yes. All right. So Suzette, that was a very timely conversation that we had. I thought it was a very excellent conversation. What did you get from that conversation that we had, and how did it add clarity to you as it relates to the restructuring of the mind, but also as it relates to the restructuring of the Black community?
Yeah, I think and why I do these shows is I really am focused on helping people gain a better sense of who they truly are and why they do what they do. And I got a lot of inboxes, particularly from my Facebook folk, talking about how they didn't realize some of the impacts even on themselves. So I think a lot of people, particularly those who never grew up with a dad, without coming from a place of judgment, have maybe gained some knowledge, and I too gained some knowledge as to what some of the effects truly are. And I think sometimes as Black folks, we've been living in a kind of survival mentality to where we haven't really stopped to really pause and understand what it is that has affected us, because we've just learned to bury it and keep moving and push ourselves forward. But I think for me, it was a very eye-opening conversation, particularly from the audience perspective of all the ways in which they felt that father's absence had impacted their lives. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, particularly women, who come away with a little bit more understanding as to, the long-term effects. I don't think, I mean, we could have had a 5-hour conversation about this. I don't know that we covered each and everything, but I felt it was just very, very eye-opening in terms of the audience reaction and many people saying, wow, you gave me a lot of food for thought. My father passed when I was young, my father, whatever the situation was where they didn't have their dad, and not really truly understanding for themselves what they have been basically affected with in terms of their father's lack of presence. So I thought it was very good, even for me. Like I said, I grew up with a 2-parent home, but some of the dynamics in terms of us emigrating to the United States, and it put my father back on his heels, coming into a new system, coming into the United States without a network, without links, if you will, for the job opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. It can really challenge a man. And I think even though as an immigrant that was his experience, it's not uncommon, particularly depending on where you are in the country, that Black men face some of these challenges. Hello. I'm sorry, was somebody talking? Hello?
Yeah, I don't know where that noise is coming. Go ahead, Suzette.
Okay, no, I was just thinking about the burden fathers carry and how, I know we don't talk about it. Fathers are supposed to be the protector, provider, but there's so many parts of, their contribution to the psychology of the child that we don't talk about.
Right.
That, like you said, those residual effects go on and on. I hear it in my friend girls. I hear it in my guy friends. And we have to really pay attention and deal with it before we step into relationships with some of that baggage. So I thought it was really illuminating in terms of how much impact they could have, as opposed to just when we think about financial resources, et cetera. Within our development as human beings, as growing into, yourself, you're developing your sense of self. Not having that parent has such a great impact. So I was so happy that we got to highlight that part, which doesn't, to me, get talked about as much as just the financial and the protection aspect.
No doubt. Some of the greater contemporaries in science, also in psychology, also in social policy, either they have fathers that were more or less there but not there, fathers that were not there at all, or fathers that more or less abused them mentally. It all changed the trajectory of their lives. Fathers play a major role in the shaping of a child, and that's why we need to have a fatherhood initiative, that's going to more or less inspire and our men to be men in the homes, and for our women to understand why it's so important to allow those men to be men, because men are at their best when they're supported by their women, and the woman knows her role and the man knows his role. But it's an ongoing conversation, Suzette. As I said, it's going to take generations, in my opinion, to eradicate. Curtis Ball, how would you like to answer the conversation, brother? And tell me who you are and how's this conversation so timely for you, brother? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, brother TKC. First of all, I would like to thank you very much, and I would like to thank Miss Suzette. I not here to self-advertise. Want to make sure I make that clear. But like Dr. Smalls has just said. Look at this. If you look at this expansive background, that's what I see is necessary for all Black men. Myself, I was a research scientist for 30 years. I went to medical school, got to surgery, decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And then now I'm moving over to mental health at age 53. And that is the kind of expansive knowledge bases that we need to have. We need to have that expansive academic knowledge base. We also need to be thoroughbreds in the street. And this is what I try to tell people. As Black men, we are, especially from the inner city, we seem to be forced to have to live a double life. We have to be mean on those streets in order to protect ourselves, to protect the ladies in our lives, mothers, grandmothers, sisters, but at the same time, gentlemen. And that is a very hard balancing act for men, especially when we don't grow up being trained by fathers. And we come up short trying to raise each other in the street. And we'd like to thank both of you for addressing these issues and the importance of having parents in the home. I think that gets lost too much in this day and age of rugged individualism. When rugged individualism is not the basic unit of society, the basic unit of society will always be the nuclear family. Thank you very much.
Oh, no doubt, brother.
Amen.
I appreciate that. I totally agree with that, man. The nuclear family is the epigenesis to the stability of society. And that's why these conversations need to be talked about, because for so long, therapy was seen as the white man's opiate. And we got to get to the point where therapy can be seen as something universal. And I'm going to say this, every therapist is not competent. Every therapist does not have the skill set to be culturally competent. And every therapist does not more or less know how to more or less finesse the science of therapy with the art as it relates to the dissemination of that therapy. So, it's rare that you have a male therapist in this space. It's a masculine therapist with many backgrounds. It's very rare. But therapy is very important, because therapy is another component to mental wellness, but also to the mental sustainability of human beings. The gospel said that man can't live by bread alone. And just like he can't live by the physical of bread, he needs the mental wellness. And sometimes that comes in the form of secular therapy, but also spirituality, which is faith. And that's why we call it the biopsychosocial spiritual model, because they tend to inculcate all those four elements, which in essence bring forth clarity and wholeness. Suzette, you talked about some of the women that had challenges growing up because they have fathers. How did that impact their relationship, Suzette, real quick, in less than 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of women in denial, first and foremost, about the long-term effects of not having their father present. I am not here to criticize, I'm not here to judge, but I do observe there can be a sense of overcompensation when it comes to, trying to achieve, trying to gain societal respect, when it comes to, jobs and positions and things like that. And I think, all of us have different reasons for being the way we are. So again, I'm just, this is straight conjecture, just on anecdotal experience. But I've seen a lot of women who, struggle when it comes to picking well and choosing people based on substance and character, as opposed to, really being attracted to that raw masculine energy. If you never really had that and you see it, it is attractive. It can, and again, I'm talking about in terms of like the bad boys, that kind of attraction where you're like, you don't even realize subconsciously that's what you're yearning for. And that's just one person I'm thinking about in particular, where I'm like, goodness gracious, I see the pathology. Of course, as a friend, I stay out of certain things when it comes to, helping to mentor or, helping uncover some of these things that, your role and your place. But I've seen it manifested in that way, in terms of maybe seeking a father figure through relationships, but what they equate as being fatherliness is not leadership. Is definitely the opposite of leadership. Actually, Kosher, if I could do a quick plug, tomorrow I'm doing at 5:30 Eastern, all male panel, and I want to talk about this very topic because there's a lot of women, the over 30, let's say, demographic that say, I'm looking for leader or leadership. And I want to discuss between, and I don't know if you'll be available, Coach, I was going to email you, the old school and the new school mindsets among Black men when it comes to the role they should rightfully take in society, their role in relationships. I just want to talk a little bit about that because I've been hearing a lot about this in the manosphere, about that generation gap and some of the, what should I say, differences in how the younger generation, say the 30 and under, approach whether it's, like I said, headship of a family and leadership there, or headship in society and leadership in industry. I just want to talk about some of those impacts. And again, if you're younger, the likelihood is that you may not have grown up with a dad. And are the younger generation of men getting the mentorship? Who are they looking at as their leaders? Like, I want to know that personally. I want to understand, if you didn't grow up with your father, where are you getting, your ideals? And, who does, do men under 30 consider as role models? I want to know this personally. And I hear some pushback from some of my younger subscribers, like, what is this? Wait your turn. What is this? I need to kind of be mentored. So I want to talk about that tomorrow at 5:30. I'm going to talk about that on my channel. But yeah, I hear it in a lot of ways, and I'm open, and it's going to be all guys. I'm just going to be all ears posing questions. But yeah, I hear it in a lot of ways in my sisters and my brothers when it comes to even fear of marriage, when it comes to, because I'm like, do they want to be married? Men and women, I mean, because when we're injured or feel a sense of insecurity or even a lack of love and worthiness, it's going to impact you. It's going to impact how you feel about forming a relationship and whether you have trust or trust issues. Right. So it comes across in a myriad of ways. Again, my heart is to understand so that we could do better, not as to make an assessment of anybody's life. We don't choose whether our father was in our lives, that, we were brought here. So I want to make that very clear. But yeah, I think there's a lot of residual effects that our communities are experiencing that need to be addressed so that we are healthier and that we are more ready to take our rightful places. Men as the head of a household, and women as well as that beautiful, as you call it, supportive role when it comes to the yin and yang of how we're supposed to be. Yes. So I'm sorry if I'm long-winded, but that's where I am, sir.
Oh no, dude, you're just an intellectual. I get it. Shout out to the Green Beret for that $5 super sticker. I appreciate it. Thank you for that. And Suzette, I don't know if I can pop on tomorrow. I definitely will, dear. I might be at the office doing assessments, but I definitely pop on.
Okay, I'll send you the link just in case.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Let me see what Cecilia Gompi is. Very true. I'm trying to keep my marriage together for our 3 sons and daughters, but their dad so far gone. He's consumed with himself and his work. Provide no emotional support. Yeah, I'm sorry for that, sweet. I'm sorry that you're having to go do that. But real quick, Curtis, before I get off the stream, this is a very good stream.
Yes. And
this is a recap from the show that I did with the lovely and the talented Suzette Speaks.
Yes.
You and I are a Gen Xers, man, and
I'm Gen X, just like you. And if I may support Ms. Suzette, my observations in these relationship spheres is that what I see with men, I see the generational gap between Gen X and millennials. Okay, and so when men come into conflict over these conversations, it generally tends to be between the Gen X and the millennials. Now, the Gen X men that I see have had more of the time, more of the benefit of therapy. However, they still may be suffering red pill rage. So, and those men, I tend to see those men leave the Gen X arena and move over to the millennial arena where they feel more supported and more supported in their point of view. Now, I should say that these men have been injured gravely. The kind of men I'm talking about have been divorced and taken to the cleaners 2 or 3 times.
Yes.
Okay. So with the, I'm going to be interested in tuning into your show tomorrow, Miss Suzette. Thank you very much, and I'm subscribed.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And brother TKC, it's like you said, and it's like we're talking about now. Same with Miss Suzette. All right, we have 3 Black intellectuals on the screen. Okay, one thing I do it just myself. You know what I mean. We're not here for self-advertising. I will try to send both of you emails or connects, because I would like to stay in touch with you very much. And I'm very glad I was here today. So thank you very much for having me. But I have been following, and to address Ms. Suzette, TKC put on a brilliant lecture the other day on hybristophilia and the fact that young women still chase after these bad boy archetypes. And that's what I see. It's in search of a powerful father or
It
some
is.
or such
100%.
that. We men, we are the first love of all women. And that's why I try to tell the sisters, and that's why I try to tell the brothers. We are the first love of all women. We set that pace, we set that tone from here on out. And now I felt sorry for the young lady who said that her husband was emotionally unavailable because at work. Okay, that is the reason why I am 53 years old, never been married, and I don't have kids. But my compensatory mechanism was always to be there for cousins and their children. So while I have no biological kids, I have a total of 23 godchildren. From the age of 19 to the age now of 53, as I'm starting career number 3. And see, this is why I'm trying to give it right back to Brother TKC as well, because this is the kind of expansive thinking that Black men have to have in 2022. We don't have the luxury. We have never had the luxury of thinking about just ourselves. And so it can be upsetting for us to hear, especially, and I'll end right here, okay? Because it can be very upsetting. And one of the things I find myself addressing every single day is the myth that Black men do not protect Black women. We do.
Right.
And the truth is this. If we do our job as protectors, you're not supposed to know we're protecting you. You're supposed to have that peace of mind that comes with knowing you are protected. That weight, and if we thought the Brother Kevin Samuels, that pressure is made for our shoulders, not for the sister's hips.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Well, listen. This has been a timely conversation. I got to get my hips to the office.
All right, now it's been a pleasure.
But Suzette, thank you. You're so effervescent. You radiate and exude positivity.
Yes.
That's the feminine oscillation that so many men need.
Yes.
And I want to give you kudos, Suzette, for introspecting, for you realizing that there could have been what I call a social coup d'etat, where a lot of our women have been compromised to think that feminism was the panacea to their problems. So many women, Suzette, high-end women, they have careers, they have money, they have status, but many of them suffer in silence because they are realizing they've been compromised. But many
Absolutely
have pride and hubris, and they don't want to come back and say, you know what, I was wrong. Because at the end of the day, and sadly, I think about, I got a family member, my sister's actually dealing with, some terminal issues. But at the end of the day, Suzette, none of that matters. Your fame doesn't matter at the end of the day. Your house on the hill, your degrees, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is family.
Absolutely.
That's
it's gonna take some of us to wake up and find out, but we're doing the work, sir. Good work over here. And I can't wait to have you back on.
No doubt. Well, like I said, it's been a great show, guys, and we're about to sign off. And thank you for everyone that has contributed, and thank you, Brother Curtis Ball, man. So we're gonna sign off in a minute. Thank you, Suzette.
Blessings. Thank you so much.
Right,
blessings. God bless you.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you, Curtis. All right, guys. So this has been another timely conversation as we talk about the importance of not only masculinity, but also the importance of family, and also the importance of getting all the proper outcomes that are needed to help us move forward. I told you, men, that when men are inspired, they become the better versions of themselves. But you cannot be the better version of yourself until you also uncover so that you can recover and begin to set those examples in your life that can give you the outcomes that you need. So once again, guys, this has been a very good conversation. Once again, shout out to the lovely Suzette Speaks. And guys, we are about to sign off.